Here's for instance, a passage from the Prose Edda that introduces Balder and sings his praises. Excuse my old Norse, it's not so very strong. Annar sonur Hóðins Balder, og fra honum gat at segja. Han sva fegur a litum og bajatar sva at lýsar af honum. Han vitrasur asa og fegursta, tathor og lík nasamestar.
My first thought when we saw it, I thought it might be a part of an airplane or a vehicle, obviously not a vehicle that you would find in a glacier. It was clearly mechanical, it looked humanoid, and based on where we found it, it was probably thousands of years old, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. It's possible. My name's Mark Hoyt. I work for Geomorphologists Without Borders, and we measure the rates of glacial recession in northern regions of the world.
Ich bin Nils Meyer, ich bin Teil einer internationalen Organisation, GUAB, die den Rückgang und die Schmelzrate der skandinavischen Gletscher untersucht. Wir waren in der letzten Zeit des Öfteren dort oben im Norden und haben einige Messungen vorgenommen. Diesmal haben wir aber was Bemerkenswertes gefunden, was wir mit Sicherheit so nicht erwartet haben.
My name is Lawrence Dixon. I'm the author of Obscured Actualities, Myths and Prehistory. Now I hold, excluding the notion that a myth is a lie, I hold that there's validity indeed in all of these complementary understandings of the nature of myth. But my own addition to this subject is the possibility, I'm being very cautious here, the possibility that these stories we call myths are much closer to history than we assume.
Initially it was Niels and I in the region. You don't need too many people to do this kind of work. We're just taking very general measurements of very large objects. But once we discovered this thing, it was a complete circus.
Ich habe beim ersten Anblick an ein Autoteil gedacht. Es hätte auch ein Gegenstand einer früheren Expedition sein können, aber wiederum so fest im Eis eingeschlossen ist auch das eigentlich unmöglich. Von daher hatte ich zu diesem Zeitpunkt...
Objects generally enter glaciers through crevasses, or they get buried in the snowfield higher up on a glacier. And because of the time that the process takes to spit this thing out at the other end, this thing would be incredibly old. So when you ask, how did it get there? I have no clue. This thing is clearly mechanical, man-made, and yet it's in a place it just shouldn't be. It's impossible. They made the decision to take it out in a chunk of ice and bring it to a local, actually it was a hockey rink, for preservation. We were pretty much removed from the process immediately. Our statements were taken, and we don't really know what's happened since, which is probably interested you guys.
When the discovery in Norway was revealed to have aspects of what we can only call high technology, in the context of that our own technology reveals to be thousands, if not tens of thousands of years old, it's a mystery, obviously. So I was delighted to be called in to have a look. And as I said when I began to speak here, any caution I have has nothing to do with any doubts about the importance of this, but simply I don't want to have my own desire that this be true overwhelm my own scholarly equipment. I want this to be true, I sure do. But let's be skeptical. Let's wait for some evidence. So there it was in this ice rink somewhere in Norway, in a block of ice. Here is this goblin.
When I hear discussions about this as being a hoax, I'm amazed because it is something urgently important. It's going to reveal a lot to us about history of civilization and humankind. I just don't know what those things are. My name is Rob Niosi. I guess you could call me a Goblin Man enthusiast. I have to say I'm not crazy about the term Goblin Man because I think it makes it sound too spooky or supernatural or something like that. As with any obsession, it's time-consuming. But I think it's time well spent, though I'm not sure that my family would agree.
It seems to me unfortunate that this, quote, Goblin Man, unquote, should not have been left in situ. We may very well be looking here not only at simply an alien technology, but a non-human, non-earthly technology, about which we can know absolutely nothing.
I first read an article about the Goblin Man about 2.5 years ago in a popular technology magazine. And I was just amazed that this wasn't like in the mainstream news. My personal opinion is that it's part of a lost technology. And it wouldn't be unprecedented because there have been technologies that man has developed in the distant past that have become lost. For example, concrete. Concrete was invented by the Egyptians, and then through trial and error it was refined, and the Romans used it extensively. And then at the fall of the Roman Empire, the recipe for concrete was lost. And it wasn't until 1756 in England that it was rediscovered. I believe the Goblin Man is one of those very important technologies, and we will probably find ways of applying it. It will become useful again. So here are a few things that I've collected that are Goblin Man related. When it was on exhibit here in New York City, I got some brochures from the exhibit. Got a few of them. They were free. Why not? This was great. One of the other enthusiasts, I was able to get this artist's rendition made by an artist from the original pieces to illustrate the detail. I was able to acquire these great pictures, which were taken just after they had melted the block of ice off of the artifacts. This is presumably the head.
In close proximity to the goblin, the piece of technology, there was a shapely piece of stone on which were inscribed runic characters. My expertise is in things Old Norse and Old English, which I have been working on for many years. Needless to say, I was honored to be asked to provide a translation.
This is probably the most interesting thing. Not everybody knows about this. This is a rubbing from a stone that was found about a month after the discovery, very close to the site.
The stone with the runic engravings upon it has been separated, although it was in fact found later, but at the same site, has been separated from the technology as if the two things are not connected. Perhaps it wouldn't suit their purposes to have a doomsday message next to the exhibit, which is being touted as something absolutely amazing and wonderful.
There might be some interpretation here, but this is what I was able to get out of it. I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power, incessantly plagued by maleficence. Doomed to insidious death is he who breaks this monument. I prophesy destruction.
Since the modern era began, we've begun to consider myths as connected to the human psyche, as a way of understanding our unconscious selves. This is the realm of Carl Jung, of course, who sees myths as emerging out of his understanding of a collective unconscious, a spiritus mundi into which we all tap.
The carbon dating had suggested that this was a truly astonishing discovery and had created international interest. I'd just like to remind those who would be skeptical or mocking that when Charles Darwin published his Origin of Species, he was mocked, vilified, criticized.
When I was watching that block of ice melt, of course, I was asking myself, who is this? Who could this possibly be? And the more I thought about it, the more I became enticed by the linkage to the Norse myths.
In Norse mythology, there is a major battle. It's called the Ragnarok, the end of the world, basically, where gods and men fight against the fates and lose. But as part of that battle, a great winter, Fimbulvetur, descends on the world. I'm fascinated by the fact that, for example, our current piece of amazing technology that's causing all these difficulties, for some folk anyway, is found in the ice.
There's this one fellow that I'm in contact with on a pretty regular basis who finds a recording that predates the phonograph. It was a paper recording. And at the time the recording was made, there was no way of playing the recording back. But since then, we've developed technologies where we could take this image of these wavelengths and translate them into sounds. And I listen to it, and it adds to my confusion about exactly what the Goblin Man is. So I'm going to play for you the recording that I acquired that is supposedly the Goblin Man.
A magic city is rising from the meadows in Flushing, New York, a fairyland that will become New York's World's Fair in 1964. The World's Fair will afford industry an opportunity to display the strides that have been made in science and technology. These private exhibitors promise to make a day or a week at the fair a memorable one. When the great exhibition opens the gates next April, the towering Unisphere will become a symbol around the world. The New York World's Fair promises to be the best in exposition history.
As a scientist and an engineer, I felt compelled to try to explore this technology. I mean, I think it's a fundamental struggle we face, trying to balance technology that we know could eventually be used for good, for bad. But as a scientist, we have this quest for knowledge. So that's really what drove me and what we ultimately decided to turn this thing on.
The fundamental issue with artificial intelligence is becoming less and less purely just computational power. No one understands particularly well how the human brain stores information, how it operates on information. People are realizing that to make an intelligent machine, you require extremely advanced and extremely sophisticated and, in some sense, extremely counterintuitive sort of software and operations, as opposed to simply enough floating point operations and suddenly you have a brain.
If you think about traditional robotics over the years, we've gotten very good at controlling motions in a very precise way, but the process of walking and getting a machine to be able to move in a real environment that humans can move in with ease involves interactions between the robot and the environment.
A four-legged robot's easy because even if it has 3 of its legs only on the ground, it's still statically stable. But the moment you go into two-legged or two-limb movement, the problem just gets so much harder.
We found the actuators in this Goblin device actually had properties that we'd never seen before in any sort of actuator used in robotics. They used a hydraulic mechanism, but it was also extremely compliant and had extremely high bandwidth. And the result was that we could get extremely precise motions with almost no time delay from what we wanted to command, and yet the actuator would immediately respond when it contacted some surface. It was a combination of properties we've never seen in any man-made actuators to date.
Now you can have the robot move around in a spaces designed for a human and move into spaces that a human was never designed to do. You can have it work in dangerous places like in military facilities with dangerous materials. You can have it in battlefield situations where it is used either as a soldier or used as a medical robot for retrieving injured or wounded humans.
So once we had finally, realized we were actually communicating with this thing in a way we understood, we began sort of testing exactly what it was capable of. We played it in tic-tac-toe was the first thing we did, and it either beat us or got a draw.
Take the game of chess. Computers a few years ago could play chess better than the grandmasters. If you take the game of Go, unlike chess, there's just no way that you could possibly enumerate in a memory bank all the possible configurations of the board.
When a person plays it, it's really just sort of a recognition thing, a very ephemeral kind of perspective. This machine was able to solve that problem too. It was able to play Go better than any machine we'd encountered before. It was able to play Go better than any of the people we brought in to play it.
You have to define what, I guess, a soul is. And I'm not saying it in the religious sense. I'm saying it has to have a concept of self and a concept of its future and its past, probably. It really ties into an interesting question of, can I think of my toaster as a being?
I would just remind those who have made the decision to make a major commercial operation out of this find, I would just remind them of yet another myth, the myth of so-called of Pandora's box. The box was opened and horrifying things came out.
I'm a fan of the old science fiction films. I remember back in the 50s, there was a reaction to the discovery of splitting the atom, where this was going to be doom for mankind in the form of the giant ants that are created by man through nuclear power. And so you have this sort of cultural reflection, this reaction, a knee-jerk reaction to new discoveries. And I think since the beginning of time that's true. You know, probably when man created fire the first time, he ran like hell and thought that was the end of it all.
Oh, what a nice day. Oh, funny, there's not a cloud in the sky, except in the earth.
We remember when the astronauts came back from the moon, we quarantined them. Chances are there was absolutely nothing from the sterile environment of the moon that we had to be afraid of, but those astronauts were quarantined to make sure. What are we doing with this piece of technology and all that it might entail? We're bringing it into public view. We're exploiting it.
I've gone to see the Goblin Man exhibit, and it's from another place, and maybe something that we should have left in that place.
Ich bin sehr froh, ein Teil dieser Expedition gewesen zu sein. Wann erlebt man schon mal sowas Aufregendes? Ich kann auch die Bedenken meines Partners Mark nicht verstehen. Ich habe ein gutes Gefühl und denke, dass wir viel von unserem Goblin Man lernen können.
The technology is extremely powerful, can be extremely dangerous, but I mean, there's really no great achievement that you can't say that about. And I think when you see the Goblin technology being applied to military hardware, it's definitely something you have to be careful of. The destructive capacity of some of these technologies, I think, is something that many people don't understand. I mean, I don't claim to understand it myself.
Suppose for a moment that this technology that we found in the ice in Norway were indeed human, and it's several thousand, 12,000 years old? What happened to us after that? What happened to us after that? If that was a great battle between human civilizations, we in effect bombed ourselves back to the Stone Age.
Now, with the Goblin and its magical technology, if you will, now fully restored, who knows what events we have unwittingly set in motion.